Hi guys, I just wanted to go through some of this information again, just to give you a review. You should be able to find all your answers in your interactive notebook, but just in case somebody missed a day or forgot their interactive notebook in their locker at school, I want to have this available to you to review for your test on Monday. So this week we talked about the early English settlements, where these people first came over to North America from England, who they were, and why they came over here. So we're going to start off with Roanoke Island. We talked about Roanoke Island, and we know that it's called the Lost Colony. It was supported by economic venture, which means that someone paid these people to come over here so that they could send raw materials or gold back to England and make money. So Roanoke Island was not a successful venture because the people came over here. They did not have the supplies that they needed. And John White, who was the leader for this group, went back to England, and it took him 3 years to come back with the supplies. And when he did, there was nobody left in the Roanoke Island settlement. And no one really knows what happened to these people. So this was Roanoke Island. That's why it's called the Lost Colony, and it was an economic venture. Now, the second one that happened was Jamestown. Now, Jamestown was the first permanent settlement, and it again was an economic venture. The Virginia Company of London was who sponsored the Jamestown settlement. And Jamestown had a really hard time, but through bringing more people over to the already established settlement, 7 years later, they finally were able to say, okay, we're successful. And when people back in England found out that they were successful, they started sending thousands of people to Virginia to settle and make money. So Jamestown, the first permanent settlement, an economic venture with the Virginia Company of London. Now, our next one was Plymouth. Plymouth was our Pilgrims. Now, this group of people came over for religious freedom. Religious freedom because they were being persecuted by the Church of England. They are called the Separatists. That's the name of their religion. Plymouth is the place. The Separatists or the Pilgrims are their religion. Now, they were separating from the Church of England because of differences in their belief system, basically. And so they came all the way over here for religious reasons. Now, Massachusetts Bay is another colony that started because of religious reasons. They wanted religious freedom. They were being persecuted. Now, Massachusetts Bay was the group that was colonized by the Puritans. Pennsylvania, as you see here on the map, was established by the Quakers. Now, the Quakers were the group of people that was they were the ones that we said that their speech was a little different. They didn't believe in violence. And they, again, were being persecuted for their religious beliefs in England. So they came over here for religious freedom. So those three colonies, Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, and Pennsylvania, were all here for religious freedom. Now, our last one is Georgia. Georgia was established as debtors. It was debtors' prison. Now, the debtors over in England, they were not able to pay their bills. They owed a lot of money, and they were sent to Georgia to serve a sentence, and then they were able to have financial freedom or economic freedom. So Georgia, we have to remember, was for debtors' prison. Now, that's all for those colonies, why they came over and where they were located. So let's talk about them in a little bit more detail. These three religious settlements, the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and the Quakers, those are our three religious groups. Now, we watched this funny video about the Pilgrims, the Separatists at Plymouth. And remember, they separated from the Church of England because of the different beliefs and customs. And they were persecuted in England for their religious beliefs. They wanted to come to the New World so they could start all over again and have freedom to worship God the way they wanted to. Our other group were the Puritans, and the Puritans settled in Massachusetts Bay. They were also called Reformers, and they wanted to purify the Church of England. They were being persecuted for their religious beliefs, and people thought that their religious beliefs were extreme. Because remember, we said that the Church of England was being sort of manipulated by the king, and so the Puritans broke apart from that, and they were trying to kind of do everything exactly the way that they thought that they were supposed to, and there were lots of rules involved. They were trying to have the purest form of that religion. And so they were being persecuted, and they came over to the Massachusetts Bay Area and started the colony there. Now, Pennsylvania is our third colony that was started for religious reasons, and these were the Quakers. Remember Quaker oatmeal, Pennsylvania? This guy that in the picture, his name is William Penn. He started the Pennsylvania colony for the Quakers. Their religious group was called the Society of Friends. They basically wanted to be left alone because of all the religious persecution that was going on. And so they came over to North America, and William Penn bought that large area so that they could be left alone and worship God the way they wanted to. So those are our three colonies that were started for religious reasons. Now, the two places that were started for economic reasons were Jamestown and Roanoke Island. And if you remember, we read an article and we filled out our Venn diagram and we talked about the similarities and differences in Jamestown and Roanoke Island. Jamestown, remember, was settled in Virginia. It took 7 years for them to be successful. When they first came over, they had a pretty large group of people. Some people died on the way over, but they had planned to have a supply ship come and bring them things, knowing that they may not be able to take everything the first time they went. They were settled by the Virginia Company of London. That was who basically had the charter that paid for this trip. And they ended up being the first permanent settlement. On the other hand, Roanoke Island, which happened a few years before, settled in North Carolina. It was not as large of a group. They had to return to England for supplies, and remember, it took them 3 years to get the supply ship back because of the war that was going on between England and Spain. And they mysteriously disappeared and were never heard from again. And so Roanoke Island was not a successful venture. Now, the things that they had in common were all of these people were coming from England. They were both economic ventures. There were a lot of people that died in both circumstances, and they both had a difficult time. But the thing I really want you to remember is this. Both Roanoke Island and Jamestown were economic ventures. Jamestown was successful and became the first permanent settlement. Roanoke Island was not successful, and the nickname for Roanoke Island was the Lost Colony because nobody really knows what happened to the people there for sure. There's no definite information. So those two were the economic venture settlements. The last colony that we need to talk about is Georgia, and all you need to know about Georgia is where it's located and the fact that it was settled because the people in England that were not paying their bills, that were not paying off their debts, were sent over here basically to work until they paid off their debt, and then they were able to have some economic freedom. So let's go through this map. And this map is going to be on your test, so you definitely want to know where each colony is and who was there. So let's start up here at the very top. This first section right here is the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and it was settled by the Puritans. The one right underneath it, this one is Plymouth, and Plymouth was settled by the Separatists or the Pilgrims for religious reasons as well. So Massachusetts Bay, the Puritans, was for religious reasons. And then the second one is Plymouth for the Separatists, and again, religious reasons. Then this third one right here, this is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was settled by the Quakers, and the Quakers were settled over here for religious reasons as well. All three of these groups were being persecuted for their religious beliefs or abused for their religious beliefs in England, and so they came over here so that they could worship God freely. The next two, this one right here is Jamestown. Remember, Jamestown was settled. It was the first permanent settlement, and it was sponsored basically through a charter by the Virginia Company of London. Underneath that, we have Roanoke Island, or the Lost Colony. And Roanoke Island was unsuccessful because all the people ended up disappearing, basically. We know that they went somewhere, but we just aren't sure where they went. So Roanoke Island is here. And then down here at the bottom, we have Georgia. And Georgia was settled as a debtor's prison. It was an alternative to debtor's prison. People didn't want to go into prison. They went to Georgia, came over here, paid off their debt through working, and then they were able to have freedom in the New World. So those are all of the different settlements that we are going to need to know for our test on Monday. So I hope that all of this video and your notes will answer any questions that you might have, and I'm sure you're going to do great. And I will see you Monday. Bye.